we're back with O.J. Simpson now as we take a look at the semifinals in the 100-meter dash. And this is a race, O.J., as we think about the earlier semis and the final yet to come, that may be better than the actual 100-meter dash in Barcelona.
Well, even though Andre Kaysen got hurt, he had an Achilles problem, and he won't be there. I think 5 deep, this team is stronger than the team that we'll be seeing, the competitors, I should say, that we'll be seeing in Barcelona. It's just sad because 2 guys, I think, will not make the team. If they went to Barcelona, I believe that they could medal.
Yes, and potential medal winners will not be in the top 3 that will represent the U.S. in Barcelona. That weeding out process began earlier today. Let's look at the first semifinal. First semifinal of the men's 100 meters with the top 4 advancing to the final later today. Carl Lewis with a brilliant performance, the world and American record holder set last summer in Tokyo, beating Leroy Burrell. Burrell, who was cut from the baseball and football teams in junior high school, now one of the world's best sprinters. His emergence on the world stage began just about a year ago.
Leroy Burrell's biggest win to date was 1 year ago at the U.S. Nationals.
Burrell away quickly. Mitchell down in lane 1. Kaysen in 2. Lewis starting to close the gap. Burrell in front. Lewis, Kaysen, Mitchell. Burrell, 9.90. That would be a world record.
Burrell's stunning world record and victory over his friend allowed him to emerge from Lewis's shadow and clearly establish himself as the world's best 100-meter runner. However, Burrell could afford a little time for celebration. The big meet of the year was just 2 months away in Tokyo at the World Championships. There, despite Burrell's best performance ever, bettering his own world record, Carl Lewis, the consummate big meet performer, came on with a rush for the victory. Burrell tasted victory and defeat in 1991 and feels last year's experience will make him a better runner.
It's all been a learning experience for me this past year because I've been on the top and I've been the world record holder. And then suddenly, shortly after that, I'm not the world record holder or the most important person in track and field. You know, so it's kind of come full circle. And now I'm using everything that I learned last year for this year. And I'm hoping that everything I learned last year will help me this year.
Burrell will have to be at his very best if he hopes to make the U.S. team at the Olympic trials. His focus is on one thing, and one thing only.
This race will be the most important race of my life, and it'll make or break my career because world records aside and past history put aside, if you make the U.S. Olympic team, put yourself in an elite class. So the trials are the most important thing at this point in time, and I'm not thinking one day past the trial.
There's Burrell, who was second to Ricky Carrigan in his quarterfinal. Mark Witherspoon in this field, a teammate, a Santa Monica Track Club teammate of Burrell's, having one of his best years. And the full lanes, Leroy Burrell legally blind in his right eye. He has limited vision there. He won't be able to see the rest of the field off his right side coming from lane 1.
It may help Burrell that he can't see out of that right eye. He'll stay loose. Now, he had a horrendous start in the quarterfinals yesterday, so I would suspect that he's going to really be working on his start technically here. This is not a tough race for him. The second race in this event with, Lewis and Mitchell is going to be a much tougher race.
And there's Burrell in lane 1. Not a great start. Coming up also is Bridgewater with Heard, Jett. It's Jett and Witherspoon. Witherspoon, Jett, Burrell finishing 1, 2, 3. Time 10.22. And again into a headwind.
As we mentioned earlier, Witherspoon is a hot sprinter. He beat Dennis Mitchell in the New York games, and he also beat him again in the quarterfinals. Once again, tall sprinter, strong sprinter, a sprinter once again, and I feel benefits running into a headwind. But of course, Burrell is a strong sprinter also, and the headwind shouldn't bother him. I don't know if he's saving something for the finals, but right now I would say Mr. Burrell could be in a little trouble. Here he is. He came up high. Pretty good start. Once again, he could have been disqualified. He actually ran into lane 2. But he didn't have a good start in the quarterfinals, and I'm sure he was thinking about his start here. And he has been laboring. He says he's had some concentration problems.
Here then are the results, the qualifiers for the finals in the men's 100 meters, with Witherspoon, Jett, Burrell, and Bates making this afternoon's final in the 100. Well, in a moment, we'll return with Carl Lewis and his semifinal heat of the 100. We'll also see him live in the finals. But right now, the second semifinal in the men's 100 meters. Now the second semifinal in the men's 100 meters. This race including the world's reigning fastest human, Carl Lewis. He'll be 31 years old on July 1st, sporting that new shaved head look. In fact, his Santa Monica Track Club teammate, Mike Marsh, did the work on the hair. There's Marsh, who moved to Houston to train with Lewis and Leroy Burrell and has vastly improved. He's been the hot sprinter this spring. Also here, Dennis Mitchell, who was bronze medalist in the 100 at the World Championships behind Lewis and Burrell last August. Here are the lane assignments in the second semifinal. Lewis in 3, Marsh in 4, Mitchell in 6. Lewis and Marsh sporting the new Santa Monica Track Club uniforms, co-designed by Carl Lewis.
And the new Santa Monica haircuts.
Carl Lewis told us he was tired of fooling with his hair all the time, decided to get it shaved off. Marsh did the job and looked like Marsh and some others followed suit on the new hairstyle.
Carl's approach to these trials are a little different than they were last year at the World Championships, where he said the finals would be won in the trials. I think he's content with just qualifying. He even told me the other day that in the long jump, if he can have a 29-foot jump early, he would only take one jump. He's just concerned with qualifying because he want to have something left for the 200-meter.
Mike Marsh away quickly. Lewis is right there alongside Dennis Mitchell on the outside, and Laynes on lane 1. It's Mitchell, Marsh, Lewis. 10.21.
Well, Mitchell won that race, and he seemed to be somewhat elated, but take my word for it, these two guys realized they got a final to run, and they were just running to qualify. And you see Mitchell is out first. He's expected to be out first. He only weighs about 150 pounds. The quick sprinter, as you can see, both Carl and Marsh in the middle of the track, running easily. They know they're going to qualify for the final. Normally, it's right about there that Carl Lewis will accelerate, and he didn't accelerate. But you can expect in the finals to see him accelerate there.
So out of semifinal number 2, it's Mitchell, the winner, over Lewis. Marsh got up for 3rd, and Trapp was 4th. They will qualify for the final later today. And here are the lane assignments for the men's 100-meter final. Carl Lewis, been a long time since he's run in lane 2. Normally he's in the center of the track. Mitchell in 3, Burrell in 4, Witherspoon in 5, and Marsh in 7. Should be a great race coming up live later this afternoon. We'll be back to New Orleans in a moment. And now we turn our attention to the men's side, where Carl Lewis will take the track as the world and American record holder. A memorable performance, beating Leroy Burrell and Dennis Mitchell in Tokyo to set the world record. A performance that saw him close in the final meters, showing that Carl Lewis at age 30, in fact, will be 31 in just a couple of weeks, still is at the top of his game. Lewis telling us that he doesn't feel any physical difference. He still feels the same as he did earlier in his career, and mentally, he's learned that you have to keep going all the time. He said he learned that in some ways from Leroy Burrell, his friend and training partner and competitor, that you have to never let up in your training. Certainly, O.J. Carl has been the wily veteran in the races leading up to this final, just doing enough to get to this point.
Yes, I said that was a change of philosophy by Carl, because last year at the World Championships in Tokyo, he made a big point of saying that you're going to win the finals by how you win in the trials, and he won most of his final races there very comfortably, not hurting himself, but very comfortably. Here, he's just run hard enough to qualify. He's been beaten twice in the previous races. The guy that the concern is about is Leroy Burrell. He's been laboring in his earlier races, and I think he could have some problems there.
All right, here are the lanes now for the men's 100-meter finals. Michael Bates from Arizona, former Pac-10 champion in lane 1. Carl Lewis is in lane 2. He's won 2 Olympic gold medals in the 100. Number 3, Dennis Mitchell, 3rd in the world in 1991. In lane 4, Leroy Burrell, former world record holder, has looked shaky in the early rounds and spent the time since the semifinals working constantly on his starts. Lane 5, Mark Witherspoon, who won the first semifinal in 10.21. A surprise in lane 6, Jett. He's a football wide receiver, a junior at West Virginia University. He was second in the first semifinal. In lane 7, Marsh. He has been the hottest sprinter this spring, vastly improved since moving to Houston to train, but was third in the second semifinal. And in lane 8, completing the field, is Trapp. He was fourth in that second semifinal.
Well, obviously, Lewis is a guy everyone's going to be watching, but the two people I'd keep an eye on is in lane 7, Marsh. As I said, he's been the hottest sprinter in the world thus far this year. And, of course, in lane 4, Leroy Burrell. It's almost inconceivable to think that the world's #1 ranked sprinter the last 2 years might not make this Olympic team. I think it's improbable.
How long has it been since Carl Lewis started in lane 2?
Yeah. Tell you one thing about Carl. He's the only guy in this race who can get an average start and still get up to the top 3. If anyone else get a bad start in this race, they're going to be watching NBC's coverage of these games.
And there's a false start. They'll call the runners back. 4 members of the Santa Monica Track Club, Lewis, Burrell, Witherspoon, and Marsh, have made this final. Half the field wearing that new Santa Monica uniform. Let's see who they charge with the false start.
And with the start being so important, this is going to be big.
They're not going to charge a false start here. There was some equipment problem. Apparently, the blocks slipped for one of the runners. Might have been Mark Witherspoon. I saw him with his arms outstretched as if saying, what could I do? And it is Witherspoon that comes to adjust the starting blocks. You see him with the measurement out and now adjusting their position. Evidently, as he tried to push off, the block slipped. The starter caught it and called the runners back.
With all this talk about Butch Lewis and what appears to be no consideration to the other 400-meter men, that's a pretty good concession that they would stop a race because a block slip. That's a pretty good concession for the athlete.
Let's take a look at a replay. Left-hand side of the screen, left-hand side, that's Witherspoon. Let's see if this block slipped. There's the gun and a slight slippage of the blocks.
Well, in the future, when we have those fastest football players, we may have 3 other entries here. You know, when you look at this field, we have 1 player drafted by Seattle, Bates.
Michael Bates.
Yeah, Trapp's at Clemson, and of course Jett at West Virginia. A little competition.
Pretty good recommendation.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you noticed that as a former football/sprinter at Southern California.
Yeah, don't forget the movie star.
All right. How could I forget? I've been your bodyguard for the last 2 days. So the runners positioning themselves again for this 100-meter final, a race that promises to be better perhaps than the final in Barcelona. No chance for a world record, though, because of the headwind. The last time Lewis and Burrell faced each other, last 2 times, world records were set.
Well, I said the girls were practicing the mind games. It appears now that maybe the guys have saved it for this final. Evidently, Dennis Mitchell had a problem.
So the last 2 times in championship races that Burrell and Lewis have met, sparks flew and records fell, but not today with the headwind.
Well, we really got to see Leroy Burrell in his start. He's had a lot of problems, as you mentioned, the last hour and a half. He's just worked on him. In the semifinals, he came out. He's always all over the lane, but in his semifinal, he was not only all over his lane, he was in the lane to the right of him.
Carl Lewis, accustomed to starting in the center of the field where they normally put the fastest qualifiers, in lane 2 here. Dennis Mitchell away quickly, and they call the runners back again. That was a pretty late gun to call them back that time, and I wonder if there was a problem again.
And I would think that Carl Lewis is pretty happy they called that one back. He doesn't normally get a great start, but sometimes a good start. I think he came up very high that time, almost had a hitch in his start, 4 or 5 meters down the track.
Let's see if it's another equipment problem or whether this will be a charged false start. Here's the start of Carl Lewis you were mentioning, O.J.
If you can see him in relationships to the other guys, head down pretty well. But he kind of came up a lot sooner than he wanted to. He's a tall man, so he always comes up high. He's not going to come out up as low as most of the runners. As you can see, Dennis on his left of your screen, Dennis Mitchell had obviously a better start. He figures to have a better start and to be leading at about 40 meters.
And a false start has been charged to Leroy Burrell.
Oof.
Leroy Burrell in lane 4, as we mentioned, has been working on his starts constantly and is charged with a false start there. Now, what does that do to his start of the race?
Well, obviously, he's had some mental problems. We're talking about Jackie Joyner-Kersee and her mental problems coming off the turn in the 200 meters. We know Leroy Burrell has not been getting out of the blocks. He's been struggling here in his earlier races. As we mentioned, he spent the last hour and a half working on his start.
He'll have to be cautious here now. One more false start, and he's disqualified.
#1 sprinter, ranked sprinter in the world the last 2 years, and there's some concern about him making this team.
Before they were called back, Mitchell looked to be out very well. This is a fair start, and it is Dennis Mitchell. Witherspoon is there, and Marsh on the outside. Mitchell in front. Here comes Burrell and Witherspoon at the line. Too close to call. It might have been Witherspoon with Burrell and Mitchell. Did Carl Lewis not make it? Did Carl Lewis not make it in the top 3? Carl Lewis, the world's fastest human, will not be going to Barcelona to compete in the Open 100.
It just wasn't there for Carl. We noticed in the semifinal meet he did not have any pickup at 70 meters. I thought it was because he was saving it. He was cruising. He came out of the blocks. He didn't have a particularly good start. I noticed that in the first false start, but I never expected Carl to be the one not to make this final. So look at the first race. Dennis Mitchell, you see in lane 3 to the right, 3 from the right of your screen. We expected him to be out there. Witherspoon in the middle of the screen has been running well all year. The man we knew was having some problem, Burrell, there you see him in second place, but Witherspoon was able to get by Burrell here.
Very tight finish.
Actually, you can see Burrell's work at leaning at the tape may have gotten him second place because Witherspoon started his lean a little early.
Leroy Burrell, who had false started and had struggled throughout this competition, qualifying for the team with Witherspoon and Mitchell. And Mike Marsh, the hot sprinter of the spring, will not make it. But the news is Carl Lewis, well back here. He is in lane 2.
And Carl knew he was in trouble early. Look at him. He's turning his head. He's looking across the track to see where he is. Now, that's something you can do in an early race. You can do that in a trial. You can do that in the quarterfinal. You don't do it in the finals determining who's going to represent their country in the Olympics.
Todd Christensen is with Carl Lewis.
Certainly the biggest surprise of the games thus far. Carl Lewis, Bill, the world's fastest human, will not be going to the Olympics in the 4x100 meter relay nor the 100 meters. Carl, what was the problem?
Well, I just didn't feel sharp today. Maybe the weather took a lot out of me. But anyway, all the guys ran well. I'm proud of them, and I know they'll represent the United States very well.
It didn't seem like you had a bad start at all, and I think a lot of people felt like you were playing possum in the early rounds, but it's just one of those days I guess you just didn't have it.
Well, I was just a little flat all weekend. I didn't feel great, but, you know, that's the way it is, and I'm very proud of the American team, and I hope they go there and kick buttons in Barcelona.
Well, you're class act for stopping by. Thanks a lot, Carl. Tom?
All right, Todd, here is Carl Lewis
again.
Isolated from lane 2.
I mean, not a bad start. Came up, well, he always comes up high early. But he's up high early. But here's the thing that surprises me. Now, Carl is a guy that normally will start accelerating here. Very few sprinters can accelerate at that point after 50 meters. He realized he was in trouble. He looked across the track. The other surprise is the hottest sprinter in the world today, Mike Marsh, also didn't finish in the top 3.
So the dream of Carl Lewis of repeating his 4 gold medal performance from Los Angeles up in flames after this performance. We'll be back.